Things have been getting really interesting in Utah as of late, with the more surprising roster changes and just lineup adjustments that Will Hardy's been willing to throw out there on the court. More recently, in the first matchup against the Pelicans, they ended up starting both Keyonte George and Kris Dunn, which was unprecedented by most people's beliefs as well as my own. That being said, I believe that Kris Dunn should have been starting from the beginning of the season, and he gave us a taste test as to why I felt that way. Now, of course, he only ended up playing 19 minutes and really didn't play much in the second half. However, they did end up pulling out the win in this one. He actually ended up with 8 points, shooting 4 of 7 from the field. He didn't attempt any three-pointers in that game, but he also came out with 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and also had 2 turnovers. Overall this season, he's only played in 13 of their games, and he's played an average of 10.3 minutes and had 3.6 points, shooting 43% from the field and 44% from the three-point line, to go along with 1.8 rebounds, 1.9 assists, and a half a steal a night. Now, when you look at Keyonte George, he is the most promising point guard rookie in the league. That being said, he has much room to grow, and in my opinion, I don't believe the Utah Jazz are quite to the point where they've thrown in the towel and decided they want to go full tank mode. With that in mind, I have a very interesting proposal. A lot of people won't like it, and I'm also pretty sure that quite a few people on this channel might have a heavy disagreement towards it, but I caution you to just hear me out. Keyonte George has the big issue of his shot making right now. He doesn't take terrible shots, but his shot selection could use a little bit of work. But more important than that, he's not hitting the good shots that he does take in copious amounts. He has proven to be a very significantly well-endowed playmaker. However, in the most recent game where he played against the Pelicans, in these past 2 games against the Pelicans, he hasn't had the most ideal turnout when it comes to assist to turnover ratio. Though previous to that, he's had some really significant games, to the point where when he started doing it, Jordan Clarkson's ability to play well and shot make actually went up temporarily, of course. With that in mind, his most productive offensive shooting night that we have seen so far this season came in the most recent game against the New Orleans Pelicans, where he had 19 points across 31 minutes, shooting 6 of 14 from the field, 3 of 8 from beyond the arc, to go along with 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals. If that is the peak of the mountain, and for Keyonte George, that is very nice, we also have to be willing to talk about the depth of the valley beneath the peak. And that comes in the fact that overall, across the sample size of games that he's played so far this season, in 25 minutes, he's averaging 9.9 points, shooting 35.8% from the field and 32.9% from the three-point line, to go along with 3 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 turnovers a night. While those numbers aren't terrible, the shooting splits are the most concerning part, because it's not as though he's taking 2 to 4 shots a game. He's shooting closer to 10 to 15 shots a night. With that in mind, his misses do become slightly more significant, though they have been largely glossed over for the fact that he has been a quite solid playmaker, a lot faster than a lot of people were expecting him to be. With that in mind, we also have to pay attention to the simple fact that he's also not a great defender. And when I say not great, I don't mean terrible, but he's mediocre at best. He's drastically improved from where he was in the preseason. However, he has certain mental errors that just don't end up playing out well for him over the totality of a game. And seeing as he's become the starting point guard and he's playing 30 plus minutes a night on a consistent basis, those minutes are becoming very dangerous in certain situations. Against the Pelicans, it was mediated by the fact that he had Kris Dunn alongside him in the first game, where he shot 4 of 13 from the field. But in the second game, he played well enough offensively with his own shot-making skill to go ahead and offset the defense that he was playing. Again, I caution you to understand that I'm not saying that Keyonte George is a poor defender. I would argue he's a better defender willingly than Jordan Clarkson, who posts a rating of upwards of 124. That being said, Kris Dunn is by far the most substantially positive perimeter defender that there is on this roster, alongside perhaps Ochai Agbaji, who just mentally hasn't put all the things together but has all the physical tools to be completely dominant. That being said, Kris Dunn has struggled to see the rotation, and then he started the game, and then in the most recent game against the Pelicans, he didn't play at all. Now, my proposal is to have Kris Dunn start over Keyonte George. I would caution this to happen over probably a 10-game sample size, just because we're trying things out and there's a lot of things to be said and positives that came from THT playing, but there was more positives coming from Keyonte playing. I believe that there could be even potentially more positives to come from Kris Dunn. Now, that is a little bit of a hot take right now because most of his production came against teams last season that were either trying to improve or weaken their overall playoff bid in terms of becoming a team with a lottery pick or having a more favorable matchup when they entered the playoff picture. With that being said, it was across a 22-game sample size, and with him being healthy, I believe that those numbers are highly replicable for him overall going forward. Now, across those 22 games with the Jazz specifically, he ended up playing about 26 minutes a night, scoring 13 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists to go along with a steal a night. He did that on 53.7% shooting from the field and 47.2% shooting from the three-point line. Now, he doesn't shoot a significantly large number of three-pointers overall, which is in stark comparison to Keyonte George, who is willing to take a lot more three-pointers, which he should in certain situations, but overall he hasn't been hitting those shots the way we would like for him to. Now, even if we were to go as far as to total up the entirety of Kris Dunn's career stats and just how he hasn't been the most efficient player, he's been injury riddled, he's had other issues off the court. Just looking at the numbers from what he's done in totality across a 280 game sample size. He plays roughly 23.5 minutes a night, averaging almost 8.5 points a night, shooting 43.2% from the field and 31.5% from the three-point line. He also averages 3.5 rebounds and a little over 4 assists a night to go along with 1.5 steals. Now, understanding that, I would like to focus more so on the numbers he puts up with the Jazz in the minutes that he plays. And while this season he's been playing more spot minutes or just not playing at all, there's much to be said with the fact that he's been efficient enough to shoot over 40% from the field and 40% from the three-point line on a limited number of attempts in the games that he's played. I also believe that he's a more mature passer than Keyonte George, and while he might not be as liable to go ahead and try and risk it for the biscuit and go for the home run pass, he does read the floor well, and he is more likely to pass the ball than he is to create a shot for himself. As of late, we've seen a lot of times he's driven into the lane and he's taken a layup that usually isn't super characteristic of him. And what I mean by that is he has a tendency to go ahead and shoot a ball now because he understands that at any point in time, he can get yanked from the game. And then he won't see the court the rest of the night. Understanding this, he's been taking quite a few head scratchers, and despite that, he's still shooting above 40% from the field. Now, this is across a healthy 13-game sample size. In Keyonte George's young career, obviously, that 35.8% from the field and 33% from the three-point line isn't going to be indicative of how he's going to play out the entirety of his career. He will, by all accounts, become more efficient, and it will just come with time. But the basis of my argument comes from the simple fact that I believe the Utah Jazz have something special that they can really put together. And as long as they go out of their way to be the best team that they can on a night in, night out basis, I believe that the correct move is to go ahead and put Kris Dunn as a starting point guard with Keyonte George as a secondary point guard. Personally, I believe it's only a matter of time before THT sees a trading block and eventually finds a team that allows him to be free in his own play style and really put all of his skills to the test. I believe Bryce Sensabaugh will also be brought back from the G League, but it will take a little bit more of an adjustment from a playmaking standpoint for him to see the floor. With that in mind, my initial argument from the beginning of the season was to have Kris Dunn be the starting point guard and eventually, halfway 2/3 through the year, see Keyonte George come in as that starting point guard. But with Keyonte being as his understudy, soaking in all the knowledge that Kris Dunn has to offer, Keyonte can also improve on the fact that he has the physical tools to be just as effective on the defensive side of the ball and also be a more reliable shooter and overall offensive weapon than Kris Dunn has been across the entirety of his career. That being said, this is a move that would potentially cut down on the number of mistakes that we see from the team, more so from a shot-making standpoint, to where I would not expect Kris Dunn to take upwards of 10 shots if you were to play him 32 minutes. Now, there is the potential opportunity where he takes around 12 shots, but largely I would expect him to take a lower number and be more liable to pass the ball and get an open three-pointer from John Collins, take a dump-off pass to Walker Kessler, or swing the ball to Lauri Markkanen. Now, Keyonte George has done a significantly better job than THT about pulling the trigger and being willing to make that pass. Over the past couple games, it hasn't really paid the total dividends that we hoped it would have, but he was also largely helped in the most recent game by Jordan Clarkson and THT having a 17-1 assist to turnover ratio that was quite unprecedented across their careers, and likely we're not going to see that even on a every 5 game stint, as this is the first time this season where they've both looked that good from a playmaking standpoint. I believe that when Lauri Markkanen comes back, having Kris Dunn be that starting point guard will be the most effective from the offensive standpoint, but also on the defensive side of the ball. Keyonte George, like I said earlier in the video, has not been the most privy to being locked in on that side of the ball. He's still green behind the ears. He still has much to learn. Kris Dunn is very experienced. He's known for having defense as his calling card, and he is substantially better than any of the other guys playing ahead of him at the point guard spot and at the shooting guard spot defensively. Because of that, I believe that he will also prevent other teams from just having their way with our guards and forcing Lauri Markkanen to be the leading scorer every single night, while having subpar help as a second scorer, because we know that Jordan Clarkson has his on and off games. I also have a solution to the Jordan Clarkson conundrum, but that's going to have to wait for another day. With that being said, thanks for tuning in this video. Let me know if you guys agree with me. Let me know if you disagree. And if you do disagree, let me know on what grounds and what you think the solutions should be. Do you think the Jazz should just go ahead and call the season a wash and tank? Or do you believe that there's been enough of a healthy sample size of games where we fought hard and played pretty close to the teeth against teams like the Phoenix Suns and the Pelicans to give us some sort of understanding that they could be a playing team? And in that sense, would you agree that Keyonte George coming off the bench under a winning regime would be better than him starting on a losing regime? With that being said, it's been your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. Make sure to like the video, comment your thoughts below, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications if you haven't already. And if you don't want to subscribe yet, let me know what I can do to coax you into subscribing in the next video. Go ahead and become a member if you haven't already to get the videos faster than anybody else does. And as always, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.